Check 1, check 2. This is a test of the emergency broadcast system. This is only a test. Protecting your business from the most dangerous cyber attacks. At the end of this webinar, we're going to offer you some specials that may be attractive to some of you, depending on your comfort where your security is today. I'm going to be entertaining questions during the presentation. On the control panel for the webinar, there should be an area for chat, and you can feel free to send me a question or whatnot. If it's germane to the area that I'm discussing at the moment, I'll try to work in the answer. Otherwise, we'll have an opportunity towards the end. If I say anything that's confusing, feel free to put that in the chat box as well and let me know. But let's go ahead and get started here. So I'm Ed Correa. I'm president and founder of Sagacious Technologies. A little bit about me. It's hard to believe, but I started in IT now 41 years ago. I got a great opportunity when I was in high school to work on a mainframe computer, and within 6 months I was managing that computer. Since then, I've worked on it feels like almost all computers that have come out. I worked for 3 different local Bay Area IT providers, helped them get acquired by national IT providers, actually 2 national IT providers, and in the third case by a global IT provider. So I had a lot of experience. After doing that 3 times, I decided, you know what, I'm going to start my own company. So 18 plus years ago, I started Sagacious Technologies, and we're now in the beginning of our 19th year of operations. I've won a few awards over the years. Probably the most notable would be the Channel Pro 2020 Visionary Awards that I was awarded in 2015 and 2016. I also was recognized as being one of the top 250 people in IT by the MS Mentor organization in 2013, 14, 15, and 2016. My company, Sagacious Technologies, was awarded awards. MSP Mentor recognized us in 2013, 14, 15, and 16 as being one of the top 501 managed service providers on the planet. And in those years, Sagacious was less than 10 employees. Today we're a little bit over that, but we were also recognized again as being one of the top 100 managed service providers on the planet with less than 10 employees, which is kind of cool. I enjoyed that. Today we have a busy agenda. We're going to be talking about security, and the big question is, what's really going on here? Because I find that most people's perception of what it means to be secure or insecure and about what's in the news is totally off mark. It also includes, who are the bad guys that attack? That group is very different than what is commonly known, and we're going to talk a little bit about them. We're going to talk a little bit about cybercrime and cybercrime as a service, because that usually astounds people. And then we're going to get down to those 8 tips that Sagacious recommends that you do to protect your own business. So security today is headline news. It seems that security breaches are on the radio, they're on the TV, they're in the newspaper, and every time you turn around, there's something going on, that there's an attack. It seems that it's always a huge company getting attacked, and they're out millions or billions of dollars because of it. And you'll see weird names like WannaCry and Petya. In this case, this ad's talking about a children's hospital that was affected. We'll talk a little bit about the city of Atlanta that got hacked a month or 2 ago. It seems that everybody is susceptible to these attacks, and that massive amounts of data is being accessed by people who shouldn't have had access to that data. Hopefully the people on this call are not victims of the Equifax hacks, I know for a fact that my data was released because it's now out there on the dark web, thanks to those hackers. But we're going to talk a little bit about how bad the problem is, what you need to know, and how to protect yourself. So some of the worst or biggest hacks of the last few years are listed here in this little chart. The least of which is that little Tumblr one at the bottom with only 165 million records being accessed. But everyone on this list has massive amounts of data that they lost control of. So the interesting thing is if you're a enterprise level business, you often can spend massive amounts of money on insuring yourself. But we already can see from the news that what they're doing is often not working. Also, when they get hit with massive fines because of these hacks, or lose control of the data, or at the very least have to buy people identity theft protection, they are able to weather those storms. The underlining thread of this whole presentation is, what about the small and medium business? What about the business with between 10 and 100 employees, or the business between 100 and 500 employees? How do they weather that? Could you weather and survive losing confidential control of your client information, of your employees' information? If people got access to full names, birth dates, social security numbers, credit card numbers, how would that go? And to say nothing of the fact of your reputation, what would that mean to you? You know, it seems like these larger companies, they get hacked and they continue on. Maybe they slow down a little bit, but they don't seem to have any big problems because of it. I know if my company suffered something like that, it would probably be devastating. And so that's the way we should be looking at the information I share today, because that's the critical message to be thinking about. How would this affect you if it happened to you? So looking back at 2017, this is a typical year. And I've outlined just some of the very largest hacks that were released or exploited in 2017, as well as some of the exploits that were new. So we have Police One, which is a cloud-based database that police stations often use. 715,000 records stolen in 2015. It wasn't really revealed to the general public until February. This whole concept of things not being revealed until much later also exemplifies a problem where most hacks, they say, go for about 200 or 200 plus days before anyone in the IT department notices that the hack happened. That's pretty bad. Once the bad guys get a hold of the data, we need to act quickly in order to lock things down and, frankly, notify those people whose data was released. There are laws about that. Most business owners are unaware. We're seeing Bell Canada, the GOP, Verizon, Yahoo. Obviously, the Yahoo data breach there is rather small, only 300 billion records accessed. There's the Equifax one that, unfortunately, I was a victim of, 145.5 million records, and that was people's credit information. So when the hackers got that information, they hit the jackpot. And there's the Uber data breach in November with only 57 million customer records. But the orange squares that I've got on there, those are exploits. An exploit is when a hacker figures out how to leverage a vulnerability in computer systems to get in. One of the reasons we say you should patch your computers all the time is because hackers are constantly figuring out the vulnerability of Apple systems, Linux systems, Windows systems. And as we become aware of those vulnerable pieces of programming, we want to patch them and patch them quickly. So we see in May of last year, WannaCry, which was a new exploit. I can still remember within the first 48, 72 hours, it was hitting the entire globe. We were able to stop it pretty quickly by patching systems, but in those first 72 hours, 300,000 systems compromised just in the first 3 days. Petya, down at the bottom of June there, was another one that came out the very next month using a totally different exploit. And IT companies have to move very, very rapidly. We have to be aware of our systems. We have to be tracking what's going on. We have to make sure that if a new exploit is released today, that we're patching tomorrow, or actually today. Sliding over to October, you'll see Crack. That was a brand new vulnerability for wireless systems. And as one of the things Sagacient does a lot is perform audits. I will tell you that 99% of the companies that we do audits on still have that vulnerability unpatched, and they're still vulnerable so that anybody using that exploit can easily get in. Bad Rabbit was similar, another exploit that came out in October. These things happen all the time, but I wanted to create this little slide about 2017 so you could see how something's always happening, and these are just the most notable things. So they say that cybersecurity is now a CEO issue. Unfortunately for me, most of the business owners I talk to say, oh, it won't happen to me. We have antivirus. We have an IT guy. Most IT guys are not security experts. They're good at fixing things after the fact. Being secure means doing things in a proactive manner and having things in place and monitoring like crazy. If you don't have visibility into what's going on the network in real time, you'll never notice that it's happening until 200 days after the fact. The reality is that $3.5 million is the average cost of a data breach. Yes, that's largely skewed because of the large companies. I tend to see that smaller companies, SMBs, small, medium businesses, those are those typically, under 500 employees, it's around $1,000, but that's not the total cost. We were brought in to help a local Silicon Valley manufacturing company a couple of years ago. They brought us in on day 6 after they couldn't eradicate the ransomware themselves, and thought we could just wave a magic wand and make things go away. My reaction was to say, well, where are your backups? And we started looking at their backups, and they'd only backed up a couple of things occasionally. They thought they were running them every day. And there was no fallback. There was nowhere to go. At that point, I asked them, well, what are the hackers asking as a ransom to unencrypt you? And they said $7,000. And I said, well, haven't you lost more than that already? And they said, well, we're probably out about 42,000 just in payroll already. I said, I hate to tell anybody to pay the ransom, but at this point, you didn't have good security. You didn't have a good backup plan. The cheapest way out for you is to pay the ransom. They did. Once they were up and running, it was the first day of week 3. So they were down for completely 2 weeks, and really messed up their company, caused them embarrassment with their clients. They survived, but it was a very expensive lesson for them. Item number 2 on this list is 63% of breaches involve stolen or weak passwords. That is very true. I have a slide that's going to come up on that and talk about that. That's a big, big problem. Greater than 300,000 new malware samples are created a day. What does that mean? Well, we talked about WannaCry and Petya, which were released last year. Most hackers are not that smart, contrary to popular belief. What they do is they take code that other people wrote and they modify it. So when we're talking about 300,000 different malware samples every day, most of that are things that were previously released that other hackers are saying, oh, great, well, I'll change it this way. Every time they change it, it becomes harder and harder to detect. Previous protection schemes that would have detected it no longer work. So that's one of the ways that they do their exploits. And 87% of senior managers have admittedly accidentally leaked business data. I certainly see that in our clients. While employees will frequently follow the rules, I find that the owners or the executives will say, well, this rule doesn't apply to me, and that's where the problems often happen, sadly. The evolution of hacking or attacks. I remember back in the late 70s, early 80s, we used to call them script kiddies. The people were writing viruses and worms and things to get into computers for a lark. It was for entertainment. My little chart, I call it mischief. They wanted to turn your screen upside down, have a happy face, maybe a devil's face, but it was just for fun. They wanted to get some news and notoriety. If they ended up on a newspaper as this virus is attacking the world, they felt great. Hey guys, that was me. I wrote that. Today, it's a different story. Today, the motivator is money, and it's organized crime. It is organizations that are going to try to steal data, commit fraud, or blackmail you. And it's usually performed not by individuals, as in yesterday. It's now done by groups. And often these groups don't have to be that sophisticated. There's just a lot of them, and they release a lot of the garbage out on the internet, and you get infected. The worst group, frankly, and the ones that actually scare the hell out of me, are the nation states, the terror groups, and the activists. They are the ones who are not doing it for money, but they're doing it for a political reason. And they're the ones that are going to go after our power grid, nuclear power plants, dams. They can take out some really important infrastructure in our country, and they're the ones that I'm the greatest personal worry about. I'm protecting my clients from the middle group. The first group is pretty much gone these days, but it's that third group that I think we all really have to be worried about. And I really think we're going to see some cyber warfare coming in the not too distant future. To explain a little bit more on the evolution of cybercrime, it used to be very centralized, which would mean you'd have one very knowledgeable hacker writing code. He would write that code from scratch. He would have his own servers. This was a very expensive hobby. They had to be highly skilled, and they would typically only attack very large targets. They didn't go after small, medium businesses. Today, it's very distributed. The vast majority of it is coming from outside of our country. China and Russia are two of the huge ones, but there's a lot of other nations where this stuff comes from. They are often buying software or exploits written by other hackers. If you go onto the dark web, and I do not encourage that because it's very dangerous, you'll see websites run by hackers selling packages containing their specific exploits, and you can even buy support programs. If you have problems, there's a help desk to call in into. And for X dollars per month, they'll lease you the software for hacking people. The reason that this is important to understand is that while it required very, very smart people to be the hackers, there were very few of them. Now that they're selling their wares on the internet, even though it's the dark web, anybody can do this. I mean, I could easily decide I'm going to become a hacking organization, buy the software, hire a whole bunch of people who don't really understand computers that well, and say, start spewing this stuff out. That means we all have to be afraid. These groups will typically specialize in specific areas. You know, I'm only going to hack hospitals. I'm only going to hack municipalities. Or they'll just hack everybody in general. But it's very cheap for them to get into this business. It doesn't require a lot of skill, and the large or the small groups, SMBs, need to be very, very afraid. I would assume that if you're a consumer, you've already been hacked. The FBI and John Chamber of Cisco's have said for years, there are two kinds of companies, those that know they've been hacked and those that don't know they've been hacked. And when we're performing our audits, that kind of bears itself out again and again. I'll go through this quickly. I think I've spent enough time. Today, hackers fall into 5 different groups. There are the script kiddies, there are the non-professionals, there are gray hats, which feel like they're doing something very legitimate. They're either helping people or they're showing people the hacking. They don't do a lot of damage because they're running a business using their hacking talents. The black hats we should be afraid of. They're the ones who are running a very elaborate business. It's a business of cybercrime. And they work with other cyber criminals and they buy the software to do their exploits. The fourth group, the state-sponsored group, we've seen things like that when North Korea hacked the company Sony. They didn't like the movie, they wanted to take it out. We've seen a lot of Russian hacking, trying to make things turn out the way they want them. And then you've got the hacktivists at the far end where they are really trying to accomplish some kind of thing that they believe in. Anyway, we have to be aware. Hackers fall in different buckets. They are motivated by different things, but IT and the IT personnel, we have to defend against all of them. We can't just think we're protecting you against one. Hackers are targeting the weakest links in the chain, and this is another important concept. If we look at this little circle diagram I created, the dark area at the bottom is the headquarters. Most people think that the hackers are only going after the headquarters of an organization when they try to hack a business. Some might think that occasionally they are going after branch offices. In reality, they're going after those things, but they're also going after the suppliers to that company. In the case of Target, where's my little pointer thing? There it is. Here's Target up here. Target was hacked I'll put it in the Target. Target was hacked rather significantly. The hackers could not get through Target's own security systems. They couldn't break into the stores. What they did is they decided to go after the HVAC company, which was taking care of the air conditioning of all the stores. The hackers found that they had weaker security. They were able to hack that company, get into it, and where's that? There it is. So here's a slide on that company after they made a public announcement. But what the hackers had done is they found an easier exploit to getting in. And as a result, Target was significantly hacked and very much embarrassed, but we also see they're still in business. They were able to weather it. Could a typical small or medium-sized business weather it? I'm going to go back a slide. Here's another important takeaway. Small and medium businesses. So I think small is 100 or less employees, medium is 100 to 500, and then you get your large or much bigger. This was from a study that Verizon did a while back. Organizations that were between 11 and 100 employees were 15 times more likely to be hacked than organizations less than 11 employees or greater than 100 employees. And that includes, the S&P 500 companies. I think this is an understatement. I truly believe that those small businesses are at much, much greater risk than this survey found. These companies are not spending enough on security. These companies don't notice when they get hacked, and they don't make any public announcements generally, as they're required to by law. So, how are these guys doing it? Ed, you've painted a really ugly picture. How are they getting in? Well, there's a whole bunch of different ways, but they tend to fall into 2 categories. There are social manipulations, where we're going to trick somebody into letting us in, and there are perimeter attacks. If it's a perimeter attack, they're going to use their talents to trick, or not trick, they're going to use their talents to break through firewalls and protection systems. That requires more talent than tricking somebody. So where's my little pointer? So like phone calls. I'm sure we've all gotten the phone call. Hi, this is Microsoft. We see that you have a problem on your computer. We'd like to help you out. Certain percentage of people fall victim to that all the time. Emails, where you're getting an email and it says, hey, we're your bank and we're increasing our security. We'd like you to log into your account so that we can put that in place. Generally, those are fraudulent. Social media. You're seeing things on various social media platforms that sound like a good idea. Maybe it's a survey. They're going to harvest information so that they can use it to hack you later. Phishing is very often, there's a number of ways to perpetrate it, but it's typically where it's a targeted attack against a specific type of individual. We're seeing a lot of this against the executives or people or CFOs, things like that. People who have access to the money, and then they try to trick them into doing something. Malvertizing, which we're going to go into in greater detail in a minute, is when they run ads on the internet that when you click, you get infected. Websites is a more traditional way, but any company running a website should take great steps to make sure that they're secure, because these companies will try and do anything to get in and get the data. Spear phishing, like phishing, is where you're really targeted. I've seen spear phishing campaigns when they were only going for the executive director of extremely large nonprofits in Silicon Valley. And they build up a whole psycho profile of the individual and their likes, and they do research on them. And when they send their attacks targeting these individuals, they include a lot of information, and it sounds so real. And because of that, a lot of people fall victim. Pop-ups on software, that is still out there, but if you're running good systems, you shouldn't be seeing that much of it. It would say, hey, you need to update your system, click here. Most Windows systems, if you're running your system correctly and you don't have local administrator rights to your computer, as you should not, what they're trying to do is get you to authorize the install, override the security built into the software. So those are dangerous. Spam, we've seen for years. I have another talk that we'll do in another month where I have 20 examples of spam that I've gotten, and there's a lesson to be learned from each. And then there's the old viruses, but these have been around forever. But you're seeing the most of this stuff is all social manipulation. I liken this to the old black and white monster movies. The vampire comes up to the house. Good evening. If you welcome the vampire in, well, now he's going to kill you and have the run of your place. If you keep him outside, you're more secure. Hackers know this. And so they know the easiest way to hack any organization is to be welcomed in. And so they try to trick you into doing that. Here's one of the ways that get in easily is passwords. These are 25 of the most common passwords. Hopefully your password is not on this screen. But what I often see at companies is your employees in their home, in their personal life, probably don't have to have specific credentials. Credentials are a username and a password. But at a company, hopefully that company enforces that you must have a username and a valid password. Your employees often, and the numbers bear this out, use those same credentials elsewhere. One of the big values of hacking an organization is getting these credentials. So let's say I've got Sally working for me and she has her password, and they go out and they hack a small company where she made a purchase. There's her username and password. What those hackers do is start running those credentials, username and password, against banks and credit unions and other shopping sites and Amazon, et cetera, et cetera. And often they find their way inside because people use simple passwords and they use them on more than a single account. Every password should have match one account, and that's it. It should never be used twice, because the risk is if one site is hacked, they've got those credentials and they're just going to run them elsewhere. So it's very important to train your employees about this concept. Ransomware is a specific kind of attack. It's where they attack a machine and encrypt the data that you would create. Typically, it'll encrypt PDFs and Word files and Excel files. It'll leave the operating system intact because they want you to be able to pay the ransom. They want your computer to still work. You just have no data. Typically, they'll give you a certain number of hours, 2 or 3 days. This happened to the city of Atlanta a couple months ago. The ransomware, I think, was like somewhere between $51,000 and $53,000 after they had encrypted the data. The city decided to take a hard stance against that, even though they didn't have adequate backups of their system and they hadn't done a good job of defending against it. At the two and a half week mark, the city had already lost in excess of $3 million because people couldn't pay fees, people couldn't pay for parking at the airport. The city was brought almost back to the Stone Age. Even in their courts, things had to be written on paper because nothing could be saved electronically because the systems were encrypted. The city, again, weighed their options there and decided, what we're going to do is we're just not going to give in. We're going to rebuild our systems from scratch. I'm happy that their bank accounts allowed them to do that. But if you have to pay the ransom, it means you weren't doing a good job on your IT. But if you weren't doing a good job on your IT, paying that ransom may be your only option. It's an ugly option, but you weren't doing a good job. Sorry. And you not only should do all you can to prevent these attacks, but have a back door so that you can recover from them, even if you have good systems. So a little bit about ransomware. And frankly, this also applies to most exploits. It's a multi-stage process. Let's say you get an email or you go to a website and you click the wrong thing. The program that comes down immediately to your computer is not the virus. It's not the ransomware itself. It's called an installer. And that will install itself on your computer. That installer may do several things. Lately, what they've been doing is disabling antivirus and protection software immediately. But then it'll make a call out to the web to where the servers are that have the actual exploit, bring it down to that computer, install it, and then that exploit will start running on the computer and trying to spread to other computers. It's a multi-stage process. Here's the nice thing about this. If we can interrupt this process of the installer and the downloader and then the installation exploiting and then stop it before it expands, we can stop the infection. Happily, at my company, we've never had an infection go to multiple computers. We've had individual computers get hit when people broke policy and allowed certain things to happen. But because we run multiple layers of security, we were able to stop the chain of the execution here. It's a very important concept. There's lots of ways to protect a company. Here's an example of a bad email. It says it's from FedEx. They tried to deliver a package. Would we believe it? Would we believe it? So if we look up here at the sender information, that's not spelled like FedEx. I would expect FedEx is a big enough company to spell their name right. That's kind of a giveaway that this might not be real. By the way, we get these periodically at my company. I never click on the link to do that. I'll go to the FedEx website and see. Similarly, if I get one from a bank, I won't click the link in the email. I'll go to my bank website in another browser. Here's one from ADP. We need to complete your payroll transfer. I'm not seeing any obvious things in this. It would be nice if I had the header information in this little picture. But this also, I know for a fact, led to a exploit. So you have to be very cautious. I think your employees should be warned. Don't click on anything that's in an email, and be very cautious when it's on a website. Here's this one. This is another important concept. This is a zip file. What is a zip file? A zip file is when you take a whole bunch of files and you throw them in a folder and then you encrypt that folder, you lock it up. Most firewalls, the vast majority of security systems, cannot look inside a zip file. If somebody sends you an attachment and it's a zip file, you are really taking chances if you click the attachment. I occasionally get them and I would never open them. Even if it's from a friend, I better have been expecting that file. Otherwise, I'm going to call them and say, Ted, did you send me that? No, I didn't. Okay, great. And I just flushed the email. Your people need to know that zip files are dangerous. Similarly, and related to here, is most communication on the internet is happening through HTTPS, or encrypted communications with your bank or the site you're shopping on. Most firewalls are not configured to look at that encrypted data. Really, really important that they are. But again, 98, 97, 98% are not configured for that. Big mistake. That means any information coming down from those websites, if that website was infected or was trying to install an installer to push out the exploit on you, your firewalls would not be able to stop it. Anyway, malvertising. We talked a little bit about this early on. What is malvertising? Malvertising is when you set up an exploit on a website. And what you may have done is, I often talk about transparencies that are put on a existing ad on a website. That transparency, the user visiting the site can't see. They think they're clicking the button on the ad. In reality, they're starting the installer to install something on their computer. Or the bad guys write their own ransomware. Some of them have been known to even pay to run an ad that contains it, and the people who are running the stuff, the websites, still allow it. I've got a little article thing here about the New York Times where they had a notice to their people, don't click on our website because there's a virus there. It happens a lot. Here's some examples. So this is a Microsoft Bing ad that was actually infected. And if you clicked on that, you would infect yourself. No way of knowing. Here's several other ads that were on real websites, but each one had been taken over by the malware. And if you clicked it, you'd get infected. You had better have really good security on your system to stop it from spreading. Why isn't my antivirus catching this? Traditional antivirus products are what we call signature-based tools. They work very much like a thumbprint. When we used to give our fingerprints to the police or whatnot, they would try to match those up with fingerprints found at a crime. And old traditional antivirus is very much the same. They would take a snippet of code from a known virus or worm or Trojan. And as your different software comes to your computer, they'd run it against a database of these snippets of code. They're looking for the fingerprint. Here's the thing. Remember our slide a while back where we talked about 300,000 new variants a day? The code is mutating. In fact, they have some code or exploits today that mutate themselves. They don't require a person to do it. Traditional antivirus that are signature-based really don't catch much of that stuff at all. This quote from IDC is saying 30 to 50% effective. I think it's less, because we certainly see it being less. We need to use different technology. Antivirus is still good for what it does, but you can't put all your trust in it. It's only one tool. Won't the government protect me? The government has its own problems. And what they basically tell you to do is put better locks on your door. They're telling you to update your systems, don't run old software, make sure everything's patched. But every time I give this talk, somebody emails me and says, why isn't the government addressing these people? Because they're not in our country. Most of them are outside. There are lots of hackers in the US. They tend to go after different things. The ransomware is that good. To be honest, we often advise people just to pay the ransom. I have a feeling that this FBI agent probably got in trouble for saying that publicly. But quietly, off record, they will say that. You've got to have good protection. You've got to have good recovery in place just in case. And if you didn't, you may want to pay the ransom. Reducing the risk of ransomware. We're now getting down to some of the tips. Number one is prevent it. I always think an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, and that cure can get really, really expensive. We want to protect users across that full infection chain. We want to have several things in place to stop it at every step. That way we're not relying on just one thing protecting us or saving us. Block sites with known exploit kits. We run software on our clients that checks the reputation of any site that a user is trying to connect to. If it's a known bad site, we block it. Similarly, when a person is trying to send out data, if it's going to a known bad site, maybe it's sucking data from the company, we'll block that too. Very important. Protect the users from phishing attacks. To prevent phishing attacks, what we really want to do is educate people. Make sure that we're trying to block known bad emails, but also talk to them about, okay, true story. I had a new bookkeeper late last year, and she knows the business that we're in protecting businesses, and she got an email that looked like it was from me saying to transfer this amount of money to this odd bank account. And she's heard me say this enough: ask, 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 don't just do. And so she came into my office. She said, "Ed, is this from you?" And I said, "No, it's not." She goes, "Good, I'm really glad I asked. Your people need to be trained." When phishing attacks come your way, it only takes a moment to ask. I know of a very large company in the area that no one asked when the request came in. They executed the transfer, and it was one of the bank people who called back and said, "Are you sure you want to transfer this amount of money?" They'd already approved it. Happily, he called one of the executives who knew nothing about it, and he raised a flag. "What's going on here? Why are we transferring this money?" And it was fraudulent. Your people need to be trained. Ask, don't just trust. Containment. The phoning home is referring to when the installer gets installed on your computer and it reaches out to the server, which has the payload, and it wants to download the actual attack software. We want to break that. Again, one of the softwares we use checks those reputations. Yes, we're running antivirus and anti-malware on every computer, but this third program stops that phone home from happening. And then if you were able to connect to that website, it'll stop it from installing. Block the droppers, that what they're talking about is the installers, from putting the payload on the computer. Stop spyware and keyloggers. Spyware and keyloggers are trying to suck data out of the company so they can sell it. If we're checking the reputation of websites that computers are trying to connect to, we can stop that. And have your team very much aware and know what to do. I like to make sure that there are written plans and all the people have been trained so that they know what to do during an attack and afterwards. Okay, training. Training is the most important thing we're going to talk about today. Most people don't understand the scope. You've all been on this call. You do. We need to help employees understand the threat and become more vigilant. We need to explain to them that cybercrime is not some pimply teenage kid hiding in a room hacking companies for a lark. It's a business. They're going for money. They are professional. And nobody is too small for them to make a buck off of you. If you see something strange, they need to raise their hand. Critical. And they need to tell other people. They should not feel like they're going to be crucified for having this happen. Very, very important. Okay, another important concept. Everything's important today. My philosophy on security and risk mitigation is this: multiple layers protect you in the same way that a bulletproof glass would. Normal glass is just a sheet of glass, and a bullet would pass through it, shatter it rather easily. Bulletproof glass is a little more complex. It's multiple layers of glass and multiple layers of a polycarbonate in between each layer. Yes, when a bullet hits the outer layer, it may shatter that layer, but with each successive layer, it's absorbing the kinetic energy of that bullet and stopping it from going through. Similarly, security at your company can't be just we have antivirus or we have a firewall. Vast majority of firewalls I see out there are totally and completely misconfigured. if they're configured at all. You need multiple layers all working together in harmony. So here's the Sagacious recommendation for what we do for our clients. We try to focus on what people are on the network at the company and what people are roaming around. Maybe they're working from home, maybe they're traveling for a conference or something like that. But it's two different, slightly different recipes, but again, layers of protection. First, we want email security. We want to make sure that when the emails are coming in, they're being scanned and it's protected. We want to make sure that the endpoint is a technical term for any computer, desktop, laptop, tablet, smartphone. The device you work on is the endpoint. All of them have to have antivirus. All of them have to be patched and maintained very carefully so that known exploits or vulnerabilities are patched. We need, if you're at the company, you want to be behind a firewall. Happier, what's happening right now is we're getting the first virtual firewalls that we can run in the cloud, and then we can start putting people who are even roaming behind a firewall. What that means is all their communication has to flow through a firewall that's in the cloud. That's going to be great, and then I'll extend that over to the right in the green box. DNS layer security, we call this Cloud Shield at my company, but basically this is the software that checks the reputation of any site you're trying to connect to, send to, receive data from, or send data to. Very, very important. But these things all work in harmony. And finally, the most important on the whole thing is training. Have a policy, have a procedure, make sure everybody's aware, and have a response plan that people know what to do. It's these multiple layers working together that protect a business. Sadly, this is not the way it's done at most businesses. And this is the money shot. This is the 8 ways that Sagacious recommends for protecting your business. And where's my little red dot? Educate and train your employees. They need to know what to expect. They need to know that they're vulnerable, that this is not something that is just a fact of life for very big companies. It's all companies. You need to use secure passwords. They need to be complex. You need a different password for every site you go to, and you should change them periodically. I'm not a big believer in changing it every 30 days or even every 90 days. I think if you've got really good passwords and you're using different ones everywhere you go, that's pretty good. But they've got to be secure. You want to reduce data access. At most companies that we go to visit, we will see that everybody has access to everything. They didn't realize they did because they're not looking for it, but I'll see things like the payroll folders are available, confidential client information that Billy Bob had no reason to access, he had access to. People only need access to the areas that they need access to. That lowers our threat level significantly. This is one of my mantras: manage, monitor, I'm missing one of the M's, maintain, and audit. Most companies hire IT companies to take care of them who react after the fact. They'll put things in place, they will trust that they're going to work, and they know that the customer will call them if something acts up. That's not good enough. You need to be proactive. You need to be preventative. If you don't have visibility into what's going on in real time, you won't detect it in real time. So management, monitoring, and auditing is crucial. At Sagacious here, we audit something all the time. And I'll say, okay, guys, today we're going to audit this. And then they have the forms and they go out and audit it. I also like to rotate the text so that they're not doing the same thing all the time and getting comfortable. Updating and patching systems is crucial. Again, we talked about these vulnerabilities in software become known. The hackers know them. They write exploits to attack them. We've got to make sure that those exploits are not going to have anything to take hold of. We need to encrypt the data and devices. All hard drives in all laptops should be encrypted. Ideally, the data systems in your phones are encrypted. You want to make sure that if a system falls out of your hands or it falls into somebody else's hands, they're not going to have easy access to the data. It's crucial. We want to make sure that your data, and that's called secure data at rest. which means it's on an encrypted device. Also, we want to secure the data in transit. We want to be working through encrypted communication tunnels. VPN is an example of one, although they're becoming a little bit old and we have better ways of doing it today. But when you're sending information, it should be through an encrypted tunnel. And you want to be running the latest technology. I successfully have most of my customers running the latest, greatest stuff, not really old software. But I had a meeting with the client on Tuesday and I said, your insistence that you continue to run on this version of Windows is putting your company at major risk. And I had to have a difficult conversation with them. The newer the stuff, generally, the more secure it is. The older the stuff, generally, the much more insecure it is. So that's very important. Okay, so you've made it to the end. Congratulations. And I'm going to give you a little update on the special offers for anybody who attended this. If you email me or call me and let me know, anybody who attended this webinar gets one of three offers. First, you could get a free one-on-one consultation. I know that we have a couple people on the call who do not live in Silicon Valley, so it's unlikely I'll get to your office. But we can have a conversation on the phone. Happy to chat with anybody and discuss your challenges, your concerns, and what your options would be. Special offer number 2 is a free network assessment worth $300. So let's say you have a small business here in Silicon Valley and you'd like me to come out and walk around and look at things and then have a meeting with you about what I'm seeing. Happy to do that. The third option is actually the biggest. For us to come in and do a full audit of your environment takes a lot of time. It takes some significant hardware and software that we put in place to gather all the data on your environment and tell you what's going on. It's a fairly well-priced product, a few $1,000s. The third offer here is I'll discount it by $500. So nice savings there. So if you're interested, just email me, go to my website. I'm on there if you decide to take advantage of this later, or give me a call. We're now to Q&A. And since I haven't seen any questions, I'm checking the panel. I haven't seen any questions yet. You're welcome to send in a question or two if you have them. And I'll hang on here. Let's see, what can I think about answering first myself, since nothing's coming in the portal yet. Some other things that we can do to help individuals is we like to do employee security awareness trainings. We offer that to our clients all the time, where representatives of this company will come out and will explain this to the employees, typically in a conference room or something. That is a really good idea. Our better clients like to have us come out once a year, twice a year, or my biggest ones, it's once a quarter. And anytime they get a group of new employees, they'll say, Ed, can you come out and educate them about what's going on? We're happy to do that. We talked a lot about passwords, and there are password managing software out there. You have to be careful. Everything is hackable, and most of the password management softwares have been hacked. But I tend to think it is much better for people to use complex random passwords and a different password for everything and use a password manager than to not do that. One of the most notorious hackers, his name was Kevin Mitnick. He did his time, and now he has a security company out there. Not too crazy about that. But he was not a great technical hacker. He would buy outfits from these uniform organizations, and then he'd go walking into companies like he was delivering a UPS or FedEx package, or he was there to do some service, and he'd look for the Post-it notes on the desks that had passwords. And then he would try to remote into that company during the night using those credentials. And he was very successful at being a hacker until he finally got caught. So many of these hackers are not that sophisticated. They don't know everything about IT and computer systems. They're just clever. And you got to watch out for the clever people. Okay, I haven't seen any questions, so I'm going to assume that none are coming. I'd like to thank you very much for joining us today. If you'd like to contact me later, I'd be very open to hearing your perspectives on this webinar, what you learned or any suggestions you have. But thank you so much for joining us. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.